Ladies and gentlemen, welcome in to SEC Nightly, the nightly show dedicated to the top news and notes from the nation's top conference. I'm your humble host, Brooks Austin, and on tonight's episode, we will talk with Greg Arias. Greg is the lead editor, for SI's Commodore Country. He broke a little bit of Chase Brice news yesterday about Vanderbilt and Chase being mutually interested in each other, and we will get the latest intel on one of the nation's top remaining transfer quarterbacks. Then we will be joined by the 7th-ranked running back in the 2021 class, Lovasea Carroll, the IMG running back, to talk about his recruitment as it continues to gain steam headed into his senior and final season down there at IMG. And we will close tonight's show with the latest news on James Coley, that jump from the UGA staff out to College Station to take on the tight ends coaching role out there at Texas A&M. But as promised, we will start tonight's show with Greg. Greg, I'm going to patch you in right here, buddy. Welcome into tonight's broadcast. I appreciate you being on with me, my man.
Well, thanks for asking, and I appreciate you having me on.
No doubt. So, Greg, as we mentioned, you broke a little bit of news yesterday. Tell us about that story with Chase Brice. Apparently, there's some mutual interest there between the two parties.
Yeah, I got a tip from someone associated with Vanderbilt athletics that said, hey, there might be some interest there. So I actually reached out to Chase through our network at si.com, talked to a couple people, and got put in contact with him. And he was more than happy to speak. He didn't give me a lot of information as far as what the substance of his conversations with Derek Mason and Vanderbilt, or anybody else for that matter, were, but that he certainly was interested in Vanderbilt. And obviously, when you look at the Commodores, 4 quarterbacks last year that played, all of them are gone now. 2 have left with transfer, or 3 actually, have left with transfer. And then, of course, Riley Neal, who exhausted his eligibility. So Vanderbilt was looking at coming into the season using either a JUCO transfer in Jeremy Musa or true freshman Michael Wright or Ken Seals. And obviously the option of perhaps being able to get this guy coming in that's going to bring in a national championship ring and game experience in a Power 5 conference is certainly appealing, I would think.
Yeah, and I was about to ask you, Greg, how much of that, quarterback vacancy do you think plays into Chase Brice's decision? Because obviously, most people thought Georgia was in the lead for his services, prior to Jamie Newman's announcement that he would be in Athens as their transfer quarterback. Brice has got 2 years of eligibility. How important is it for him to enter into a situation where the starting job is available and almost promised? I would assume, is that the case there at Vanderbilt? Would that be promised, you would think?
I wouldn't think that it would be a promise in the sense that they're pretty high on both of the freshman quarterbacks, certainly Michael Wright, who just picked up his 4th star this week, according to Rivals, if you put anything into that. And then Ken Seals,
all good,
who is the kid out of Weatherford, Texas, that is coming in. And they really like both of these guys. So I would think that they would say, hey, you're the leader in the clubhouse coming in. It's your job to lose, would be the pitch that I think Mason would make to Brice here.
So, I guess it's kind of a little early. Well, it's almost late. As we were talking in pre-show, it's about getting close to that time where Chase probably needs to make a decision, with the spring semester already having begun at almost every major college. How early do you think, or how soon rather, do you think we see this decision from Chase Brice? And, ultimately, where do you think he ends up landing, Greg?
That's a great question. Obviously, I think Georgia now probably out of the picture. I don't think the Bulldogs, even though he has 2 years remaining, would want to bring in 2 transfer quarterbacks and set themselves up in a situation where if Newman were the starter this year, he's got 1 year, he's gone. Then Brice takes over next year, he's got 1 year and he's gone. You want to try to find somebody that, can be there for a year or 2 at least, for 2 or 3 years, I should say. And I just don't think that situation works at Georgia. I think it would work well at Vanderbilt. Not really sure about everybody else. But when you look around the SEC, not a lot of places there that I think he could wind up going and being a guy that could step in and play those 2 seasons if he's looking ACC. And I have no idea if Clemson put any restrictions on him as far as, which they can't actually. I guess he's a grad transfer. he could go to the ACC. I have not looked there. I looked through the SEC. I just don't see a fit there other than Vanderbilt if he were to go to the SEC, and obviously he could surprise us.
Yeah, I mean, the SEC's littered with places that would probably accept him. But, one team, rather, that we've kind of heard rumblings about, but Chase mentioned in an article, and you mentioned it in your article, he hasn't had any contact with that South Florida football team or that staff, which with Scott Foster, his former offensive coordinator there at Clemson, now taking that head coaching role. What do you think's played into that decision to not talk to the South Florida coaching staff, Greg?
I don't know anybody associated with South Florida and didn't really reach out to try to find out any information there. I do find it surprising that they haven't talked to him, but for whatever reason, I don't know if they've got a kid coming in, and again, didn't really look that closely at their roster or their recruiting. But if they've got somebody coming in that they feel like is a guy that they want to have and have the opportunity to potentially be a 3-year starter there, that could be a reason why you don't reach out to a guy and have someone come in that will be there for only 2 seasons if you've got somebody you're high on and are willing to take that chance that they can be a 3-year guy.
I got you. So, away from the Chase Brice news, though, that is the most pressing, and we appreciate you for being on to talk about that. Vanderbilt, the team you cover over there at Commodore Country, which you guys should go support all of the fine work Greg does over there on SI.com. But, in terms of Vanderbilt, they bring in a new offensive coordinator this year in Todd Fitch. What does he bring to the table there for Derek Mason's program?
Well, he brings an offense that I think will be exciting to the fans to watch. Now, the caveat to that is we don't know exactly what that offense is going to be because he's coming in and he's either going to have potentially Chase Brice, as we've talked about, who I think he would design the offense around his strengths, or he's going to have one of the 3 other transfer or the 2 freshmen starting at quarterback. And I think there's certainly different skill sets with those guys. So it's kind of a guessing game as far as we are at this point. A lot depends, I think, on which quarterback ultimately winds up starting as to what kind of offense they're going to be able to run and how comfortable they are with that new quarterback, regardless if it's any of the 4 that we've talked about coming in and how much they can absorb, because obviously the freshman, the transfer has played at Hawaii and then at a JUCO, and then, of course, Brice coming in. They're all going to have to learn a new offense in a very short period of time. So there's a lot of things that go into, I think, what he will be able to do with the new offense coming in next season.
Now, what is it looking like in terms of recruiting there for Vanderbilt? I know I didn't quite prep you for it, but we're about to round up the 2020 class. Typically, under Derek Mason, they've fallen anywhere from, around 45 to around 60 in terms of recruiting rankings. What is the Vanderbilt class looking like in 2020, and how is he rounding it out? From what I've noticed, from the outside looking in, he's not really recruiting the state of Tennessee. He's finding most of his recruits and most of his talents outside of the state. What's going on there?
Well, right now they're ranked 52nd in the recruiting class by 24/7, and he mentioned at the end of the early signing period that he was probably looking at certainly a receiver, a linebacker, and you can always never have enough depth on the offensive line. So I think those are 3 positions that remain open. I know that in the last week I've written a couple things about one receiver, Ladd McConkey out of Georgia, is a kid that's they're throwing some interest towards. They've also got Brady Ward. I'm trying to remember these names off the top of my head. A kid out of Mobile, Alabama, that's an offensive tackle, 6'7", 320, a big young man that is reportedly waiting on an offer from Alabama that he has not received yet. And so he's been in contact with Vanderbilt. And certainly I think they're in consideration. Will they get any of these kids? I don't know. But I think those are 2 guys that probably come in. They're both 3 to 4 star guys, depending on the service. And obviously, those ratings fluctuate. But certainly I think 2 guys that could play at this level and probably be a benefit to this program if they got them in. And then I know they're talking to some other people, but Vanderbilt is a little bit different than some of the other schools in the conference in that, being a private institution, they keep a lot of things close to the vest, and there's not a lot of information that comes out of there. So everything you find on recruiting, you kind of have to do it outside of the university, getting information from them. They just don't share it.
Yeah, Lad McConkey, the three-star wide receiver out of North Murray High School here in the state of Georgia, has been a really fast and high riser in this 2020 class. Just recently got an offer from the University of Georgia. Within 24 hours later, Vanderbilt obviously on the phone handing him an offer. You talk about an absolute space creator. This is Julian Edelman. This is Wes Welker. This is Danny Amendola that we're talking about here in Lad McConkey. And it's a name that's really, like we talked about, gaining a lot of steam. But Greg, before I let you go, let's talk a little bit of hoops here on SEC Nightly. I know this is a predominantly football-oriented television show, but not very often do we have an NBA, former NBA All-Star coaching a basketball team here in the SEC. What is Jerry Stackhouse doing there at Vanderbilt in his first season?
Well, I think Stackhouse, and I wrote this in an article because of late, obviously, if you kind of keep up with Vanderbilt, you know, they had their streak of 1,080 consecutive games with a made three-pointer snapped last Saturday against UT. A lot of the fans have been on him about some of the things that have been going on. But when you look at what he inherited a team that was an absolute mess. Their best player, Darius Garland, injured early last season when he wasn't even here. He goes to the NBA. Aaron Nesmith, who is probably going to be a first-round draft pick this season, gets hurt before the Texas A&M game, and now he's lost for the season. So he's actually down to the point where he's playing 3 walk-ons and brought a manager onto the roster as a walk-on to have enough bodies to simply finish this season. So we don't really know a lot about what Stackhouse will ultimately be once he has more talent on the roster. But I think he's done a pretty solid job, especially in the aftermath of losing Nesmith, of getting some guys to step up. Dylan DeSue, a freshman out of Pflugerville, Texas, has really stepped up the last couple of games and started to play. You can see his fingerprints in what he's doing on the outside. You won't really see it in the record this year simply because there's just not a lot of talent on this roster outside of 3 or 4 scholarship players, Saban Lee, Scottie Pippen Jr., the son of the Hall of Famer, Dylan DeSue, and Ejike Obina. And then if they get Cleavon Brown back, who's also out injured, that could be a boost. But after that, it gets really thin as to the talent coming off the bench.
All right, Greg. Well, again, man, I really appreciate you for coming. We've got to get on to our next guest here in Lavoisier Carroll. But before we let you go, tell people how they can find your work over there at Commodore Country, Greg.
Well, you just, as you said, Commodore Country, you can type it into your search bar, or it's si.com/college/Vanderbilt. You can find it there. And then, of course, Twitter at Greg Area Sports or SI or VU. You know, you caught me off guard there, and I can't even remember.
All good, brother.
Yeah,
I'll put it in the show notes. We appreciate you, Greg.
Just look up Commodore's Twitter and SI, and you'll come up. It's Vanderbilt SI. That's what it is. I'm sorry.
All good, man. We appreciate you, Greg.
Thank you.
Have a good one, baby.
Good night.
All righty, ladies and gentlemen. And like I said, we are going to patch in Lovasea Carroll. He is on the line waiting to get to us. But before we get into that, we got to get into a break right quick. Tonight's broadcast is brought to you by the Maven Network, SEC network of team sites on si.com. For all the latest and greatest news and headlines on your favorite squad, head on over to si.com and find your team today. All right, let's bring Lavoisier in. Let's not waste any more time. Lavoisier, how we doing tonight, my man?
How you doing?
I'm doing well, man. You doing good down there in Bradenton? I'm assuming you're down there in Florida.
Yes, sir.
All right, my man. I see you got some friends in the background.
Yeah.
All right, my man. You IMG boys always messing around, aren't you? Look at him. He decked out in Under Armour gear. Who we got behind you?
That JC Lynn.
I got you. Are you in class right now, man? Are you in a study session? What's going on? All right, let me tell the folks a little bit about you, Lavoisier. The 7th ranked back in the 2021 class, number 1/2 overall. You released the top 5 last week of South Carolina, Auburn, Georgia, Florida, and Ohio State with a commitment date set for August 6th. So let's get right into the interview here, Lavoisier. You're a former South Carolina commit. What is it about the Gamecock program that made you commit all the way in the spring of your sophomore year, my man?
I mean, like when I first got on campus, it's just like I felt love. Like the energy they were giving, it just felt like love to me, and it felt like family. So I just went ahead, did my thing, committed right away.
All right, so what changed, right? You said you loved the campus and loved the environment, and then in April of 2019, in September, you reopened your commitment of last year. What happened there, and why the change of heart?
I mean, I knew when I transferred to IMG that I was gonna get like well known than what I was back home. So I felt like I need like open up my recruitment back open so I get like more exposure to the college instead of being stuck on one school. So I felt like I just did my thing, opened it back up.
I feel you. So now you said, you left your hometown there in, Warren County, Georgia. Having ties to the state of Georgia, do you have any, feelings towards your home school? Do you have any responsibilities to the G or anything like that? Being a Georgia kid, or did you even grow up a Georgia fan?
I mean, I grew up an Oregon fan, but Georgia always been the school that I watched since, like, I'm from Georgia, so they always been one of the teams I always look at on Saturdays.
I got you. So as a running back, man, I got to ask you, how important is it for you to enter into a college program where there's another running mate, another talented back? Do you think it's important to have someone to share carries with in order to keep you fresh, for the next level if you were to enter the NFL?
Yes, sir. I feel like it's very important because, like, right now, me at IMG, I got, like, another back, Katron Allen, a sophomore, and, like, we rotate out, and both they can do the same thing. So I feel like it's very important, like, to get to the next level at that point, like, to be fresh, healthy, and all.
All right, so you're coming from Warren County High School here in the state of Georgia. That's a single A public school. And what was it like to go from a single A public school that ran the wing T offense all the way down to IMG Academy, one of the biggest schools in the country with some of the most talented football players in the country as well?
I mean, like, it was fun that time, but, it was very different because, because IMG is like, yeah, it's like college, like, it's just football school. Really ain't no freedom. So it was a different, like, stage, but, I got, like, environment. I adapted to the environment, did what I had to do.
I got you. So, what are kind of the subtle differences? I mean, obviously the offenses are totally different, but just in terms of like the caliber of football, coming from single A public school here in the state of Georgia at Warren County, and then going to IMG and playing some of the biggest programs and traveling all across the country, what is kind of the different, talent levels and what kind of caliber of football? What's the difference in the two schools other than, just the size?
Like, the difference is just, like, first of all, we get on a plane mostly every Thursday going to a away game. So that's probably, like, one of the biggest difference I ever seen. But, really just, like, the competition, like, you face every day. Every day.
I got you. So it's a totally different offense, right? You went from that wing T where you're running a lot of stretch zones and things like that, and now you're in a full spread system, a single back there standing next to your quarterback and running a lot of inside zones and traditional stuff like that. How quickly did you pick up the offense down there at IMG?
I mean, it took time. But, eventually, like, after, like, practicing, studying over the playbook, it eventually came to me. But, it was a hard time, like, because, come from a wing T, like you said, only knowing, like, one play, like, 28 bucks or 29 bucks, or like, different personnel and all that. So it was very different.
Yeah, that wing T is not very complicated, right? It's just get the talented guy the ball and let him run outside pretty much. Where am I here? All right, so down there at IMG, there's a ton of athletes, and a ton of high caliber prospects. Who's a guy you walk around the locker room or you walk around the weight room, especially the weight room, and you just look at him and you're like, God dang, that kid should not be that strong. Who's a guy on your football team potentially that you're like, is a physical freak and someone that's really, really strong in the weight room?
I would say JT Ellis. He'll DN for us.
Yeah? Where's he going?
Well, he got offers, but he ain't, like, committed or nothing like that, but he got offers.
All right, I got you. So, we talked about your top five. You got South Carolina, Auburn, Georgia, Florida, and Ohio State. 4 SEC schools, and then Ohio State, the Big Ten champs there thrown in as well. Who's a coach or a staff? It could be a coach in particular or the staff as a whole that you've really grown close with during your recruitment process.
I would say Coach Travis Williams from Auburn. That's probably, like, one of the strongest relationships I have.
Okay, what is it about Coach Williams? Is it just, he's a relentless recruiter? Is he a guy that talks to you, as much as possible? Or is it just a bond that you two share?
Yeah, it's just bond there. Like, he just joke around, like how the way he joke around. Then when things get serious, it's time to get serious. But he's an all-around coach for me, and I love him. the depth.
All right, last question before we let you go, Lavoisier. Top 5 is already set. We've talked about that. But if you had to declare an early leader, just about 7 months away from your recruitment, or excuse me, your commitment day, if you had to, absolutely had to, gun to the head, who would you, maybe put up in that leading spot?
Somebody repeat that.
In your recruitment right now, if you had to name a leader, I know we've got a top 5, but I got to pin you down right now. If you had to name a leader, who is leading the race for Lovasea Carroll?
Right now, it's Georgia. It's all going to be Georgia.
Oh, yeah?
Yes, sir.
So Georgia's in the lead for Lovasea Carroll. That's the news out of tonight's episode with the nation's 7th ranked running back. All right, now I said that was our last question, but I always like to ask this question, especially with recruits such as yourself. A guy who's in and around that top 100 ranking in your class. You're ranked 102 right now. At the end of your senior season, where will Lovasea Carroll be ranked in those national recruiting services?
Hopefully, I'll be number 1. Hopefully. They're in a prospect. They're going to try to be number 1. But, if I be top, honestly, rankings don't even matter to me, honestly.
Yeah.
College, play for the best team and do my thing. And you really worry about the rankings.
Nah, I totally understand you there, Lavoisier. All right, man. We appreciate you for joining us. You guys, his Twitter handle's right there underneath, running down on the ticker. So you guys go give him a follow. Lavoisier, man, good luck this season. Stay healthy during the camp season this summer. And go ball out this senior season, all right, my man? All right, bro. All right, bro. We'll see you.
Go Dogs.
Oh, man, I cut him off on the Go Dogs. That was all my bad right there. Lovasea Carroll says on SEC Nightly that the University of Georgia is his leader headed in to the summer of his, biggest recruitment season right now for juniors. Upcoming, juniors right now, upcoming seniors for that 2021 class. This is the hottest portion and the hottest time of their recruitment. And for him to enter into that portion and period of his recruitment process with Georgia as the clear and walk-away leader at this moment, that's big news for the University of Georgia. RBU right there. And, of course, as the commenters said in the comment section, a little woof-woof in the background right there, right? Lavoisier giving us a little bit of breaking news here on SEC Nightly, and just so rightly that a dog is barking in the background. But, coming up, we're going to be talking about the James Coley news, him headed over to Texas A&M to take over as the tight ends coach. But before we do that, we got to take another break and ask you, man, wherever you found this show, whether it be Facebook, whether it be Twitter, whether it be YouTube, or whether you're a traditional podcast listener, man, we would just ask you to take the time out and show support to the show by following us on Twitter over there at SEC Nightly. That's at SEC Nightly. We're the only one, so it's not very confusing. We are the only nightly show and live stream dedicated, again, to the top news in the nation's top conference. And while you're on there, man, if you miss any part or any portion of tonight's show, if you missed the interview with Greg where he was talking about Chase Brice, if you missed part of the Lovasea Carroll interview right there with the nation's 7th ranked running back in the 2021 class, head on over to the podcast, man. However you find your podcast, just search SEC Nightly. We are likely to be there. I know for a fact we're up on Spotify right now. We are going through the application process with the Apple Podcast, and we will eventually be approved and up over there. But, man, we really appreciate you guys' support. But on to this James Coley news, man. James Coley, former offensive coordinator at the University of Georgia, spent just one season in that role before, being replaced by Todd Monken. And, say what you want about James Coley as an offensive play caller. Say what you want about him as an offensive coordinator, or for that matter, even a quarterback's coach, which is the role he also held and simultaneous title he held at the University of Georgia over the last 2 seasons. Say what you want about him as an offensive mind. One thing that is absolutely certain, James Coley can recruit and absolutely will continue to recruit at Texas A&M over there on Jimbo Fisher's staff. And then look, it's not like Jimbo Fisher needs any more help recruiting the state of Florida. He's got good ties there in the state of Florida, but James Coley's only going to help there. I don't know what the question is there in the live stream about Vandergrift and Carson Beck. But, let's see here. Let's get to this question right now. Live question from MomCat67. Great name, MomCat67. I don't really get the excessive quarterback recruiting, then Coley leaving. Do you think Newman knew? Look, I know one thing's for certain. I know Brock Vandagriff had to have known. I don't think Jamie Newman knew. Jamie Newman got to the University of Georgia and made his decision to join the roster there for the Bulldogs, 2 weeks. 2 or 3 weeks prior to this announcement that, Todd Monken was going to take over as offensive coordinator. But that being said, I don't think it's an issue with Jamie Newman. I think Jamie Newman and his quarterback camp and his coaching camp has made it very clear that he wants to be in a pro style system. He wants to, continue to further improve his ability to run a pro offense, because that's where he's going. That's where his aspirations are, to get to the NFL level. So, whether or not Jamie Newman knew, I don't think it matters. Todd Monken is definitely an improvement on James Coley, and I've been one of his biggest defendants, whether it be on social media or in our writings over there at the Bulldog Maven. I think James Coley got a little bit of extra slack and a little unnecessary criticism, as most offensive coordinators at the University of Georgia do. Look, one thing I know about the Georgia fan base, they are one of the more passionate in the country. They are one of the more, proud in the country. But one thing I do know is they don't necessarily like their offensive coordinators, whether it's Mike Bobo, whether it's James Coley, and now Todd Monken. They're going to catch heat every time the Bulldogs don't score. The offensive coordinator is to blame. I've grown up around this program since I was in diapers, and that's one thing I know. Even Jim Chaney, y'all called him out all the time as well in the Georgia fan base, until they're gone. Once they're gone, it's like, oh, dang, Mike Bobo was fairly good when he was here. Jim Chaney is doing some decent things there at the University of Tennessee. But again, I think the writing was on the wall. Back to James Coley, if we could for a minute. I think the writing was definitely on the wall in terms of his future or lack thereof at the University of Georgia the moment Todd Monken was brought on to be offensive coordinator. And I think that future got even more in doubt when Buster Faulkner was brought on staff there at the University of Georgia as well. So once all that happened, I did not think it was going to be an opportunity that he was going to end up returning to the University of Georgia. I think everyone pretty much speculated that. And now what this does is it opens up an on-field position for, whether it be Buster Faulkner or if they bring in another one, another offensive mind and put him into the quarterback's coaching role, or whether Todd Monken takes over the quarterback coaching role. We don't really know that yet. That news will come down the road and in the future. And you guys are more than welcome to check out the Bulldog Maven for any of that. But, with that being said, I don't have any more show notes planned for tonight. That will be our show. Told you we're going to try to keep them under 30 minutes here. For those of you listening on the live stream, if you haven't figured out what this is yet, this is SEC Nightly. We do this Monday through Friday starting at 9 p.m., broadcast on our Twitter feed at SEC Nightly, broadcast on the Bulldog Maven's Facebook page, if you guys want to check that out, and broadcast on my YouTube page over there at Brooks Austin, where we will be doing a offensive tackles, University of Georgia tackles breakdown in tonight's film session, and we'll have that set for a release tomorrow morning on the Bulldog Maven. With that being said, that is our show for tonight. We appreciate you guys for listening. And however, wherever you found this, man, give us some support. Hit that subscribe button. Hit that thumbs up button. Whatever it is, show us your support, just a little bit past watching and enjoying the broadcast. We appreciate you guys for tuning in. We'll see you next time on SEC Nightly.